Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Powerhouse Fence Show. My name's Dan Turbyville, and I'm going to be talking to you tonight, and hopefully, you're going to be listening. So, today I want to talk about trade shows. I've seen a couple posts on social media that's like, why are we going to trade shows? Why are we paying to do this stuff? Some things along those lines. And so, I just wanted to share my opinions. This is unbiased, it's unsponsored, and maybe even unsolicited, but here we are. So I don't have, there's nobody from any association here with me to steer the conversation, and I have no obligation to say anything nice about anyone. Um, so yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. We are we're attending some events that are coming up. We're going to Fence Tech. I said some events. Actually, we just have one.
I was about to ask you where else are we going.
I know. I know. I'm all out of it. So we're just attending one event that's coming up, Fence Tech. I don't know, in what, like a week and a half or 2 weeks, week after next. I don't, sometimes.
Basically a week.
Yeah, yeah. So, but we're not really going to talk about Fence Tech specifically. We're just going to talk about the whole concept of going to trade shows and other fence industry events. So, we are brought to you by Memphis Fence Company, Simpalo, MFC Manufacturing, and we have a couple of partners. I need to figure out a way to say that actually doesn't sound ridiculous. The Thornton Fence / Business Consulting Group. I notice now he has two logos: the Fence Consulting and Business Consulting. So, and Fence News. That's somewhere up here in the general vicinity that I'm pointing.
Correct.
Thank you. So welcome to the show. We already talked about what we're doing this week. So kind of the bottom line, I put a note here. Is it worth the time and money that it takes to get there? So that's what we're going to try to, I'll share my opinion of that. That's what we're going to try to get to. So, excuse me. We are live. We used to talk about things that we were listening to and things that we're reading. I've been listening to the audiobook of Good to Great, and this is my first time ever. I know it's really popular. It's been around for a little while, but it's my first time ever, and I really enjoy it. It's there's a handful of them that I've listened to that I actually like really enjoyed listening to, and this is one of them. Some of them I listen to because I believe it, but I think that there's like valuable content in there, but it's not really the funnest thing to listen to. Good to Great actually is good to listen to. So if you haven't checked it out, I would suggest that. Thank you everyone for listening. Like always, if you have any suggestions for any show topics or guests or questions or anything else that you want to throw out there, then send it our way and we will try our best to respond accordingly, whatever that may be. So this week, the development team for Simpalo, this is the Simpalo story of the week. The development team for Simpalo is still working on the updates that were supposed to be ready to go to Fence Tech by now. It's like this all the time. We get down to the wire and we're scrambling around, just like with us attending Fence Tech. So it definitely is not our fault. We're not the common denominator. But yeah, so we packed everything on a pallet today that's going to be shipped to Fence Tech. And I think tomorrow was the deadline for like the ship to the warehouse kind of thing. So now we've got to like coordinate and get it shipped directly to the show site. Anyway, we always do that thing, right? We always kind of get down to the wire there. But I don't really want to talk about the new updates yet. I'd rather wait until they're actually like in the production version of Simpalo. I've been testing them in the development version. So there's like two different versions of it. And I've been testing them in the development world and I'm pretty excited about some of the stuff. I'm hoping there's one more thing that they can get done in time, but I don't know. We'll see. So before we really get to the trade shows and events and stuff like that, I'm going to give you like a little bit of a backstory, right? Here we are with the history lesson of the week, but this time it's about me. So I was born, if you don't know, if you've been listening, you probably know. Sorry, I'm going to tell you again. But if you don't know, I was basically born into this thing. So my grandfather started Memphis Fence Company with his brother in 1971, and I bought it from my dad in 2013. So I'm the third generation owner of Memphis Fence Company. I did work for another fence company when I was in college, but I've never had like a real job doing anything else. I farmed some, I've built some, barns and buildings, and like done a lot of random stuff that wasn't ever like a full time job though. So this is the only career I've ever been a part of. So because I was born here and because I grew up here and all of like this has been my whole life, I just kind of thought, oh man, I know everything. Uh, the people that are here, like we're already doing it bigger and better than everyone else. And like I kind of lived in that bubble for a lot of my life. And I don't know where it came from, right? Maybe some of it is like the kind of old school mentality of I don't know, solitude, maybe is a good way to put it, that was in the fence industry. Maybe some of it was that. I don't know. But I just kind of was like, nah, I know it all. We're doing it bigger and better than anybody. So I ain't listening to none of this stuff. That's kind of where it was. Uh, well, then I messed around and somehow I started listening to Dan and Cannon, My Fence Life. And I listened to several episodes of that, and we were doing residential fence at the time. So a lot of the stuff they were talking about applied to us. We made some changes in the way that we operated our residential fence. We prolonged the extinction of residential at Memphis Fence Company for 1 calendar year, in large part because of some of the things that I heard on that show. And I was like, oh, I want to try these things and see if it makes a difference. And well, it did. It wound up not making it to where we kept residential, but that wasn't a that wasn't a like fault of theirs or anything, right? It just still didn't make sense for us to do it. Um, but yeah, we changed some things in our residential world because of stuff that I heard on that show. And I mean, we didn't completely revamp the entire business or anything, but we started doing some stuff differently. And so I kept listening, and then I started listening to some other shows. And, I when we stopped doing residential, I kept listening. And I suggested to a few people, I was like, hey, why don't you talk about maybe some of these topics? I mean, I don't know. It Nobody ever really did it. I'll just say that. And I'm not bashing anybody. It's just the way that it was. And so that's what led me to sit here right now, was because nobody else did it. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to just hop in there and I'll do it myself. And if something happens, if it works, if one person out there listens and learns or grows or whatever from this show, then I've done what I set out to do. Uh, anyways, didn't I keep going down these random rabbit holes, and that's just kind of how I live, I think. So, yeah, so we started doing this. And then somewhere along the way, I don't know if it was before I listened, maybe that's the reason why I listened, but whatever. I joined some Facebook groups on that were fence industry Facebook groups, right? So I wound up in a few of those. And what I figured out is there's a lot of I put nonsense in my notes. So take that however you want it to be. But there also is some good stuff in there. And every once in a while, you see somebody post something or somebody comment, and it's like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And so I guess that wall that had been built of the like, oh, we're doing it bigger, better, I know it all kind of wall, it just crumbled. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I actually don't know. Right. And we're actually not doing it bigger and better. And so in a lot of ways. And so those walls kind of came tumbling down there. And then I just started soaking up whatever I could. And so now my daily routine as I drive is that I listen to something, right? So that maybe is a fence industry podcast, maybe is the fence industry podcast, or maybe is another one. Maybe is a business podcast, maybe is a book, like something basically every day, either to work, from work, or both, I'm listening to something, trying to soak something in. That's really the best time for me. It's once I get to work, life is pretty chaotic. Once I get home, life is pretty chaotic. So to and from work is really the best opportunity that I have. And I mean, I just try to soak in whatever I can, right? So bear with me. I promise this is all part of the story. It's all going to tie back in here in a minute, right? Maybe somebody out there kind of has that same mentality that I used to have. And maybe I'm giving you a little bit of perspective, a different perspective. So don't listen to this stuff and don't read this stuff thinking that, everything in there is going to change your life or change your business or like just drastically make a difference. You might find something like that, but don't expect it. I think it's important that you consistently listen and you consistently work on improving yourself, your business, whatever that may be. Personal development, business development, whatever happens, right? Just if you keep listening, you'll pick up things here and there. So now my history of attending events. So the first time I ever was at FinStech was I don't know, somewhere around like 1998. Uh, I don't exactly know the years, right? But somewhere in that vicinity. And it was like in Ontario or Sacramento, California. I know it was somewhere near where the Mighty Ducks played hockey, and I think they played in Sacramento. So it was somewhere in that vicinity. And I remember here in Ontario because I thought it was in Canada, and I was like, "What? We're going to California. I thought we were going to Canada." So anyway, somewhere out there. My dad took me and a handful of like our crew leaders and stuff like that here from the fence company, and we all went out there. And I believe the main intention for going was to buy some tooling and equipment and stuff like that for the fabrication shop because that's when they were first kind of getting that whole thing rolling. So we went and we bought saws and we bought like an iron worker, a piranha. So we started, or I say we, I mean, I was a child, but like he and, other people started buying this stuff. And I think that's kind of where the connections were made and where the decisions were made as to what type of equipment to buy and what we were going to put in that shop. And the things that we bought then are at least one I know for sure is still in that shop. There's a couple of other parts and pieces in there that I think some of them were the original stuff that we bought, right? But I think a lot of it's been replaced, just wear and tear over the years. But anyway, next time I went was about 10 years later. Yeah, that is 10. I had to check my math. About 10 years later, I think it was like in 2008 or so, I went to a show that was in Las Vegas. No idea the reason why we went, but at the time, I was more worried about Las Vegas than I was about FinStech, to be honest with you. And so I didn't really get much out of it. But I had a good time. I got to see a bunch of neat things, and that was pretty much the extent of it. Again, I don't really know the reason we went, but we were there. So then the next time that I went to FinStech was 2023 in Oklahoma City. And that was simply because Simpalo was launching, right? So like we launched and initially became available at FinStech Oklahoma City 2023. And we sat over in the corner. Oh, so I was a guest on Dan and Cannon's show a few weeks before that. And I was super nervous. I don't know that I've ever been that nervous in my entire life, right? If you know the Simpalo story, you'll know that I sold like all of my personal assets outside of Memphis Fence Company to fund Simpalo, right? So it was a big deal. In my world, it was like all of the money went into Simpalo, and we like barely squeaked by with paying to go to the show and setting up a little booth, and it was pretty nerve wracking experience, but yeah. So we were there. We were sitting in the corner. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no clue what to expect with like buying a booth or setting up. And I'll kind of get to the exhibitor stuff later on towards the end of the show, but we didn't really know what we were doing. And I don't know, we met a bunch of people that came by and looked at Simpalo, but I didn't really do a ton of like networking type stuff. I didn't attend any classes. I didn't do any of that stuff. We sat in the booth, and I mean, it was like, again, down to the wire. You'll notice that's a theme with me. And so, like, the night before the show started, I mean, man, we were up till like, 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning kind of stuff, like cramming all the stuff we could into Simpalo to have it like as polished as possible for that show the next day. And then we went the next day, went to the show, showed it to people, talked to people, all of that stuff. Immediately when the show closed, went back to the hotel room and did it over again. So it was basically like we were, you know, the day shift was at the show, the night shift was in the room trying to cram everything to try to like fix some of the stuff that we had found that day during the show, and just try to clean up all of that. So it was a crazy experience. We didn't go to any like parties. We didn't really do much of anything. We did go to dinner. So I mean,
Good.
there's that. Like we went and ate dinner a few times, I think, but and then we ran around gathering up some stuff that we realized we needed in our booth or should have had in our booth. And man, I think my wife Alyssa, I think she like ordered some cards on maybe from like the FedEx Kinko, someplace like that. Found some somewhere, and they could like print them same day and have them ready for us to pick it up. Because I think we went to the show and people were like, "Oh, do you have a card or a brochure or a flyer or anything?" And we're like, "Cue the crickets, Ilaria." Right. So we had nothing. And so then we're like, we need to go get some cards for tomorrow. It was very interesting experience. Um anyway, so then later on, I went to the first FWA show in 2023 that was in Las Vegas. And I think a part of that was like I got a room for an hour or something. And so that was like the first time I'd ever been a speaker or, hosted a class session, or I don't even know how to describe it, right? But I stood in the front of a room that had some tables and chairs with some people sitting in it, and I talked for an hour. And we kind of just did like a demo to a bunch of people at once about Simpalo and showed them what it did. So that was a pretty cool experience too. I'd never done anything like that. So there was, man, a lot of new experiences with it. It's been a super cool journey from the Simpalo side, right? So then the list started to grow. So at the end of 2023, I went to the first Thornton Fence Business Conference. Well, at the FWA show, I got to meet a lot of people. We were an exhibitor, but we had kind of figured out a little bit how that thing goes. We kind of knew the routines and stuff like that, and so then that allowed us a little bit of time to kind of meet people. And I wasn't going back to the hotel room and cramming every night trying to figure out how to improve Simpalo for the next day, right? So got to meet a bunch of people at the FWA show in Las Vegas, and did so that was kind of like my first little taste of networking. Well, then later that year, I went to the first Thornton Fence Business Conference. I think that's the right name. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm terrible at names. So sorry, but I do my best. Went to that, and that was like, yeah, I did some networking at the FWA show, right? But that also was in Las Vegas. And I mean, Las Vegas is a really cool town to go around and see all the stuff and everything. So that is a little bit distracting, but and we didn't stay in the same hotel with everyone else. So there was kind of that disadvantage, right? We did go to like some parties and stuff like that in Las Vegas that we had not done in Oklahoma City prior. So it was a cool experience to kind of grow into that side a little bit of it. And then the Thornton Fence Business Conference, that was a really cool experience. It was at the Shangri-La in like Monkey Island or something like that. I mean, it was probably a really cool place to be in the summer, but when you go there in December, there's not very much to do. It had like a golf course, and there was water all around. So, I guess, maybe a lot of people boat out there and, that kind of stuff. So, like a real summer kind of place. But what it did was basically that conference was the entire hotel. There was nobody. I don't think there was anyone else there other than the people that were a part of that group. So when the sessions were over for the day and you went outside and you sat on a couch, the other people that were sitting on couches around you were also there for that same thing. So it was like fence people everywhere. And then, we went outside and went and sat by the fire pit, and it was just a bunch of fence people. And so it was just this whole atmosphere, right? Of the whole thing was just fence folks. And that was really cool. So again, a lot of networking happened there, and it's described as the intangibles. So it's the things that happen outside of the event that are the things you can't really describe. Right? I can tell you what it's like to walk around the show floor and meet vendors and meet other fence people and do all of that stuff, but it's really hard to describe the connections and the relationships that you build outside of those show hours when you're sitting around a fire pit. Um, and so that was my first experience at that was the Thornton Fence Business Conference. So then 2024 comes around. Hold on a second before we get in 2024. Oh, Jeff. Hey, how's it going, man? Thanks for stopping by. So we get to 2024 and go to the Northeast Regional Trade Show in Groton as an attendee. So that was a different thing because, I mean, I went to the first two Fence Techs as an attendee, but then went to the Northeast Trade Show and just walked around and talk to people. And like at this point I have a decent network of folks that I know, so talk to a bunch of people that I know, talk to people that were exhibitors, and taught a class there, like some sort of introductory to commercial something or another. uh, and so again, another different experience, right? And what I learned there was it's a different, like some of the people I knew, right? Some of the people had been at other trade shows that I'd been to. Some of the exhibitors or vendors I knew, but a high percentage of the fence people, the installers and the fence companies, fence professionals that were there was a different group. So that was really interesting to me. And then, of course, in 24, we went to Fence Tech. We went to the West Coast Fence Show. Again, a regional trade show, different group of people there. So that was not the same as the group of people that were at the Northeast show, right? It's on different sides of the country. So it's different groups of people. And then I went to the second Thornton Fence Business Conference in 2024. So this time I took Kenny with me, and I talked to Kenny when we were there, and I was like, "Hey, we need to do a recap episode just of the things that you learned," because I think it was my interpretation of talking to him about it was pretty mind blowing, eye opening, that type of experience for him. He had never been exposed to anything like that. We went and sat in a room and listened to a bunch of smart people talk for 3 days, and he was kind of just like, "Wow." So then 25 missed the jackpot show, which is the Northeast. It goes from like the Northeast Regional Trade Show to the jackpot and kind of like alternates back and forth. So missed that. That was my daughter's birthday weekend, so couldn't make that. And then we are going to Fence Tech, and we'll see what else happens in 2025. Sorry for that really long story about all of those things, but just kind of wanted to show how there was like I did nothing. And then I kind of opened my eyes, and like now you see how it's ramped up. So some of these events I've been to as an exhibitor, some of these events I've been to just as an attendee, some of these events I've been to and just sat and listened to people talk because I want to be in a room with a bunch of smart people and I want to hear what they have to say. And so it's really hard to get that, right? Like you can listen to stuff. I told you, driving back and forth, I listen to stuff. Sitting in a room when there's no distractions, there's not anybody that's cutting you off or riding your butt or anything like that while you're trying to drive. I mean, just sitting in a room and looking at a person face to face and listening to them talk is a different experience than listening to something through your radio of your truck. So at this point, I've met quite a few people, right? And it's cool to go and see the people that catch up with folks, and kind of live that whole experience. So if you go like constantly to these shows, then you'll kind of like build a little I don't know, a little friend circle or like a little group of folks that you know. And so as you're walking around, you can be like, oh, hey, how's it going? Good to see you again type stuff. But yeah, so that's really cool. So the first one was really awkward, right? Had no idea what was going on, didn't know what to do. And then as I just kept putting myself in that uncomfortable area, the more I went and the more I did, the more comfortable I got. So if you're nervous about going to the first one, just go. Right? Just go. There's nothing negative. Well, I won't say there's nothing negative that could come from it, right? Because obviously there could be crazy things, but I mean, it's not like you're going to go in there and people are going to beat you up or anything. Like,
Maybe.
yeah, I've never experienced that at any of these shows, but
For now.
all right, not yet. Alaria is getting a little more comfortable, and she might get a little rowdy. I don't know. So, okay, here's what I figured out. And I think this is going to be in order of importance for me, or I don't know, order of significance, right? Number 1, classes or sessions. We already touched on this a little bit, but so FinStech is coming up. Massive catalog of classes that you can attend, and they have different paths that you can go down. I don't fully understand it. I haven't really studied it that much. We don't get the opportunity to attend any of these classes, unfortunately, at this FinStech. So I haven't really looked into it a whole lot, but I did listen to a podcast that talked about it some. Anyway, there's different paths. So you can go down like an installation path, a management class, a management path, different paths like that. And there's, you're not locked into one, obviously, but there are kind of like titles like that, I think, on some of the classes that'll kind of help direct you through the course of the show, what classes you could take to benefit you in any of those areas. So you go in and you listen. Same as listening to this podcast, right? Same as listening to anything. You go in there and listen, and it's not because you're going to go home and you're going to restructure your entire business and you're going to change your whole life and you're just going to do a 180, right? It's not that kind of thing. And I would say don't walk into any of this stuff expecting to get that reaction out of it, right? But you do little things here and there. And if you go in there and you do try to change everything or do try to do everything that you hear about, right? You go sit and listen to people talk for a couple days, you're going to hear a ton of really great ideas. And you're going to hear a lot of really good things that people are doing. But if you sit there and you write down 10 pages of notes and you're like, oh man, I'm about to go back and do all of this stuff, you're probably not going to do any of it. Right. So what I would say is go in there, pick out a couple things. Right. So, yeah, if you want to take the 10 pages of notes, go ahead. But then when you're done, pick a couple of those things. Right. Don't try to do them all. So even if you don't, if let's say hypothetically you go and you sit through some classes and there's absolutely nothing you're going to change. Well, I don't know. Maybe you should be the one teaching the classes if that's the case. But I think for most people, you're going to find something. Right. But if nothing else, you're going to hear different perspectives. And you're going to hear the way that people do things different than you. And so for me, I start to think about it. Even when I'm listening to something that isn't even about the type of business that I do. So I was listening to a podcast about his last name's Hess. It was the recent Founders podcast episode. And I mean, I sit here and listen to this guy, and he built an oil business, and I think he started like in the 1930s, right? So obviously not even in the fence world, but I still listen to it and I still hear the things that they say. And I try to pick out some stuff and I think, man, does that apply to me? Could I do that in my fence company or software company or whatever, right? Could I take something out of their playbook and apply it here? Ilaria, don't you have some like drink music?
Not really. They're kind of boring. I have this.
Okay, so that's the sound of me taking a drink.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like the stuff that's for me, right? So I listen to it and I think, how is all this stuff going to apply to me? Or how is there anything in here that could apply to me? And then I might even not take a whole concept. right? So if somebody gets up there and they talk about multiple different things, right? And let's wrap all of that up into like one big concept that they're trying to convey to you. I'm not even going to take that whole concept. I'm not even going to take the whole chunk. I'm just going to try to get some little crumbs off of it, right? So some little pieces here and there that I can take back with me, and then I can apply those to the way that we operate. And I think it's kind of like momentum, right? Or maybe like a flywheel. It's really it's not like it's gonna flip a switch overnight and make all the difference in the world, but you just keep working at it and you just keep chipping away a few little crumbs here and there from all of these different things that you hear, and you keep applying it and you keep learning and you keep growing, and then next thing you know, you look back and you're like, oh wow, I'm different. This company is different. Things are different than they were 2 or 3 years ago, and that's the thing, right? Like that's the thing. I didn't even put that in my notes, but that's the thing. So now I can just quit talking.
That's it. We're done. Goodbye.
So you start just applying these few little things, right? And if you go to a weekend, if you go to a week, if you go to Fence Tech and you go through there and you pick out your couple things, well, then next time you go to some other event, you go in there and you pick out a couple more things, right? And that's what's building that momentum. And then also, I think it's just the fact that people, I haven't quite figured out a great way to convey this, but I have an opinion that's buried in here somewhere, and hopefully we can get it out. So I think that a really fantastic step that I personally took at some point along the way was knocking the first block out of that wall, right? Whenever I first kind of like, or peeking over the wall, maybe, right? Whenever I first questioned that whole mindset, that whole mindset of oh, I know it all. I know what I'm doing. We're doing it better than them. Like when I first questioned that, that was a good turning point. And then whenever I started listening and thinking, wait a minute, how can I apply that to me? And then I started actually putting effort into applying things that I heard and trying to gain more knowledge. And like that is, I think, what's really important, right? It's that I'm trying. And so I've accepted that I need to improve. And now I'm actually putting effort into trying to learn how to improve and trying to put things in place to improve. Uh, hey, Isaac.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for stopping by, man. Good to see you. So I think that's a huge deal, is just kind of the realization that things could be better and that people might say something that would help you along the way. So that's a good first step. All right. So we talked about the classes and sessions. Remember, these are the things I've figured out. This is kind of my takeaway from the events that I've been to. Number one was the educational side of it, right? The classes, the sessions, the things like that. Super beneficial to go sit in a room and listen to somebody talk and put your phone on do not disturb or mute or turn it off or like whatever that is, and just go in there and listen. So, number two, networking. We've talked about this a little bit, but there's a huge networking potential among your peers when you go to these events that you're probably not going to get much exposure to. Yeah, you'll recognize the same people kind of commenting back and forth and stuff like that on social media and that kind of thing, but the networking potential that you have at these events is massive, right? And I promise, I won't say everybody, because some people kind of walk around and like they're laser focused on whatever they're doing, where they're headed. But most folks, you could just like walk up and start talking to somebody. Is for me personally, like that's a terrifying concept, right? To just walk up and start talking to somebody, but you can just strike up a conversation with folks all over the place, and when you do that, you're just building that network, right? And the next thing you know, you've got 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 phone numbers that you can use when you need to. Yeah. Isaac said even walking around can inspire you. Isaac, are you going to Fence Tech? Let me know. So, where else are you going to get the opportunity, right? Other than going to some fence industry event or some other event that fence people are at. I don't know. You're not really going to get that networking potential among your peers, right? There's You walk into a room and there's hundreds or thousands of fence folks in that same place at the same time, all there for the same similar purposes, right? And then you can go around and you can see your vendors, right? So walk around, shake hands with vendors, the people that you're spending money with. A lot of the times we have these like email or phone relationships. And yeah, I know social media, like there's pictures there, but I personally don't go stalk people that I do business with on social media.
Ha.
Yeah, I know. Um, so some folks do that, and I'm said stalk. That probably made it seem like I was being a little bit cynical about it, but I don't go look up people that I do business with on Facebook most of the time. So I don't. I kind of just get like the name with the face kind of thing whenever I go and I finally meet someone that I've talked to for several years, and that's a good benefit of going right. But that networking thing is really big. So you start meeting people. Next thing you know, you're going out to dinner, you're going to get drinks, whatever that is, right? Like a lot of the vendors have parties at around these bigger events that you if you're doing business with them, you might get invited. Maybe you get invited because they want to do business with you, right? But there's a lot of kind of like after party type stuff that happens, and a lot of it is invite only. There are also a lot of it is kind of just open, and you might just go sit down at a restaurant somewhere and look around and there's a bunch of folks already in there that you can talk to. But yeah, so you start meeting all the people, hanging out with the people, kind of doing that social networking type of stuff. And once again, that's where you get the phone numbers, right? And so now you got somebody you can call if you have questions, you need some help. I mean, maybe you just want to vent, right? So I talk to people that are outside of like the business world, right? So these people have jobs. One person specific I'm thinking about right now is related to me, but they're not in any kind of like position of trying to manage people, trying to run a business, trying to do any of that, right? Like they're just doing their thing. And I can talk about some of the stuff that I deal with them, but it's a little bit different when you can talk to somebody who maybe has some advice for you or maybe can can like relate to what you're going through, right? What's up?
Nothing.
Oh, uh can't attend fence tech. Okay. Sorry to hear about that stuff, Isaac. So if you need somebody to call and vent to, I got you. Um all right, so it's also next thing, number 3 is the spectacle of the big show. So Fence Tech in Nashville. I think there was like something like 7,500 people there.
It was feral.
It was crazy, right?
Yes.
It's so big.
And so busy.
And there, well, so yeah, yeah. There's so many people going around everywhere and you just get to see all the stuff, right? There's vendors in there that, man, they roll out all the stops with their booths, right? And they'll have, I mean, some of them will have like whole freaking bars and lounges and all of this kind of stuff set up in their booth. And it's just a place you just go hang out. And I mean, yeah, the vendors and their sales reps or whatever they may be are there too. And like they're trying to, sell you something ultimately. But I mean, it's really cool to see all of the stuff that goes into it. If you stick around until we talk about exhibiting, then I'll kind of give you a little peek of what goes into that. But I mean, just seeing all that stuff is crazy, right? Like, what was it? It was maybe it was either in Las Vegas at the FWA show or it was in Oklahoma City, maybe. I can't remember. But somewhere my salesman, man, they had like, I don't know, this like 60 by 60 booth, and they had like a podcast studio set up in their booth. They had, cornhole and couches and like some other kinds of games and stuff. I mean, it was crazy. It was like a whole to do to go to their booth. I think was it Master Halco in Nashville that had a really big booth that had like hedges in it and had like a full bar in there and all that stuff.
I think it was them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff is just crazy that you see. But then there's also the other thing, right? When you walk around and you see the products that are there. So everybody's going to bring their latest, greatest, neatest, most impressive stuff. And you walk around and you see some stuff and it's like, oh, it's going to be like, oh, wow, that's freaking cool. Right? I promise you, you walk that show floor and you look at the stuff that's in there, you're going to find something that makes you go, that's pretty neat. Or you might have that whole thing of like, oh, I knew I should have made that thing when I thought about it 10 years ago, and here it is, right? That's also a thing that happens. But yeah, no, it's really cool to see what all goes into the booths, what all they have, what they bring. Once again, the vendors have parties and stuff like that you can go to. The Fence Tech kickoff party is a big thing. So it's grown. I think the first year for it as well was Oklahoma City 2023, and it wasn't officially affiliated with Fence Tech at the time, I believe. But then last year it was in the event center of Fence Tech, and I'm not. Is it? I have no idea where it is this year because that's really the details that I suck at finding out ahead of time. And I didn't plan to talk about that, but that party is crazy, right? It's really big.
It's fun too.
Yeah. And I mean, I think they're going to have like a custom hat making stand or some kind of thing like that.
They also had like things where you could dress up and take pictures.
Yeah.
What else?
They had a
Good
lot of
food.
games and stuff in there too, right?
Good food.
Food. Yeah. So I think Robert Whitaker and a lady, maybe Danielle. I'm not sure. I didn't know her. So I think they were on Dan Wheeler's show a few weeks ago and they were talking about the party. So if you want to hear what the party's going to be like, you can go check out that episode of Dan Wheeler's show, the Fence Industry Podcast. All right. So the party's going to be great. The vendors are going to be there. I don't want to say everybody's going to be there, right? Because when you go to the regional shows, there's like smaller regional type vendors that are there. And then you go to the big show and it's going to be a lot of your national vendors or people that aspire to be national vendors, like, Simpala. And then you go to the smaller ones. And like I said, gets a little bit more regionalized, but you still have some of the big national folks there too. So you get a nice variety. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to talk about as far as being an attendee. Oh, I have a camera in the way and I can't really see the comments sometimes. So Isaac said he's planning to exhibit in 2026. That's what I'm talking about. So now from this point forward, I'm going to talk about from an exhibitor perspective because we're a little bit of both. And so if you want to hear about it, might give you an interesting perspective if you're not an exhibitor, but maybe if you're thinking about becoming an exhibitor, I got some opinions, right? That's pretty much all I have to offer is opinions. All right. First of all, it's expensive, right? Going to trade shows and exhibiting is expensive. So I jotted down a few of the things that we have to buy. All right. So first of all, we every time have gotten a 10 by 20 booth, and that's at the national shows somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 for a 200 square foot piece of concrete floor. Well, then it's mandatory that you put carpet in there, and you're going to need some tables and chairs and I need electricity, like all of these things that kind of go into it. So $5,000 for the booth. Then I placed my order for carpet, tables, 2 tables, hopefully 6 or so chairs, and then a few power outlets and stuff like that. That's another $5,000. The first time I went to the show, I thought I was going to get the internet provided to me by the exhibit hall. So they have I don't know what they would do, right? I didn't do it, but I guess they would run like I don't know, an internet cable to your booth or something like that. But I think for like 30 megabyte per second internet or maybe 50, it was, you ready? You got a drum roll? I'm going to tell you the cost.
I have it.
Okay.
That's all I have.
$12,000 for the 3-ish days of the show.
Should've
Yeah.
guessed that one.
Yeah. It was insane. $12,000 to have an internet cable. So you run into that kind of stuff and you're just like, holy crap. So giveaway stuff. I don't, we probably got $5,000 invested in the stuff we're going to give away, or wouldn't you think, Ilaria?
Probably
I think you
more.
ordered a decent, huh?
It's actually more. I think it's like 6.
Okay. Well, there you go. So, I mean, and that's not, then you got hotel rooms and travel. And I mean, people are still getting paid while they're there. You got food, you got all of this stuff. I mean, it is, it's a lot. It's a lot of money that gets into it, right? So if you want to ship one pallet from here to Salt Lake City, Utah, $2,000 each way. So you want to have the people in the exhibit hall, they're going to pick up the pallet and carry it from the back of a truck to your booth. That's $1.50, $2 a pound. So a 600-pound pallet, that's somewhere between $900 and $1,200. So it's it adds up. Now, that's one way of doing it. There's people out there that like they'll get a 10 by 10 booth, put a table in it, and then they'll have like a bag that they check on a plane, right? And all of the stuff that they're going to have in their booth is in that bag. So maybe they got like some brochures and some things like that to give out, put a table cover in there, just put a few little things and go hang out in their booth with their stuff that they brought in a suitcase. So you can cut out a lot of the expenses by being able to do that. So Isaac, if you're still listening, that might be a way that you could do it and cut out some stuff because like for me, I don't know that I have to, but like, I mean, I'll have a TV. I've got a couple computers with a couple monitors and like all of that kind of stuff that I can't carry on the plane. And then also I have a bunch of stuff that we'll give away. Right. So, uh, it just depends on what you're going to do. So again, what I'm sharing is my opinion, my experience of the way that we do it and what we've done. So before we ever even book flights and hotel rooms and ate any food or did anything else, like we're $20,000 into it. And I mean, we're basically got our stuff there and got a spot to sit it. We didn't even get there yet. Um, so it gets pretty expensive pretty quickly. And so what that did to me is it makes me realize, man, we talked about my salesman booth and the Master Halco booth and some of these other booths, like Ameristar will always have a big booth, with a bunch of stuff in it. Like you've got some of these companies and just the amount of energy that goes into it is crazy. And the amount of money that they put into it. And then they'll have a party, right? So they'll throw a party, open bar, whatever you want to eat, all of that kind of stuff. And they'll have a band up there. It's like, man, I mean, there's no telling how much money they spend. I think, I don't remember where we were. Maybe it was when we were in Nashville. I think CPSG had like, I bet there was 50 people there running around in CPSG shirts. And so, I mean, you think about like getting them there and getting hotel rooms. So it gives you a little bit different appreciation and perspective about what goes into those big booths and what these big vendors put into these shows to be there and to show you stuff when you come walking around. Me, we're just doing a little booth with a little bit of stuff and it's crazy expensive. I can imagine what these other people are putting into stuff. I mean, it's wild. Yeah. So, all right. So the other thing that well, just to kind of sum all that up, I don't think I'm ever going to go to one of these shows and get enough new subscribers to cover what it cost. Right. But the anticipation and the plan is that by branding and being there and, people seeing me 2 and 3 times, things like that, like eventually they might come around and be like, all right, fine, I'll sign up. And, it just kind of like builds. And so it's the branding of it, right? So I onboarded somebody recently. I think I've said so. Y'all should make a drinking game out of how many times I say so during an episode. I onboarded someone recently who I met at the Northeast Regional Trade Show a year-ish ago. And I didn't recognize their name at first, but like when we got in there, I was like, oh yeah, I know who you are. And I mean, so a year later, here we are meeting back up and now they're doing their onboarding into Simpolo, right? So it's pretty cool to just kind of have that like lingering return, maybe. So there you go. Take a shot. I don't do a very good job at like I don't do a very good job of trying to convince people to sign up for the software ever. I don't do a very good job of trying to convince them to sign up when I'm on the show floor. I just kind of take the approach of, hey man, if it's going to work for you and it's going to be beneficial to you, then cool, let's do it. I'll show you what it is, show you what it does, answer all your questions, and then from there, that the ball's in your court. So next thing, it's expensive, right? And at FenceTech, I believe we're going to be too busy to walk around, see any of the sites, right? So it's really hard to get away from our own booth to go look at other people's booths. We'll pass by to and from the show, to and from getting some coffee or the bathroom or something like that. But we don't really get that opportunity to just walk around and talk to people as much at these big shows because it's so busy. We don't really get to attend classes. And I think, Ilaria, you took some classes in Nashville, right?
Yeah, that was fun. It
Yeah.
was interesting.
Hmm.
I took 3, I think 2 or 3.
Yeah.
About social media.
So we had a few more people that went with us to Nashville than what we're taking to Salt Lake City just because it was down the road, basically. But we don't really get the opportunity to attend classes and like I said, walk around, see all the stuff and do all that. We get a little bit, but not as much as what you would get just as an exhibitor. I've talked about this, but like it's a lot of work. So kind of getting all the stuff you're going to give away, getting all of that designed and ordered and packaged and everything, getting things to and from the show, booking your flights and hotels and rental cars and trying to sort through that. That's a lot of work before you ever get there. JC Gurry says it is really busy and they run into the same issue. That's good though, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I look at it and I say, wow, I'm glad that I was busy all day. I don't want to put all of this effort into going to a show and then I don't really want to have the time to walk around. So I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, right? It's good if you go and you don't have time to walk around because you're so busy talking about your product all day. All right. So we got things to and from, we got hotel rooms. Yeah. So like I said, it's busy and it's a lot of work just getting there and getting everything set up. But then you get there and now you talk to people all day long and it's like, holy cow, you're just the setup and tear down. That's a whole interesting thing because you only have like a little window to set up and a little window to tear down. I say little, depending on what you're doing, it could be a little window, but I think we have like a day for setup and then tear down. I think the show normally stops at like noon or something on Friday, and then everything has to be out of the room by 8 o'clock. That in itself is a spectacle to see. Just to see everybody just boom, go to town and just start tearing stuff down, and forklifts are going around, and there's man lifts taking down signs, and like all of the stuff going on in itself is a pretty impressive sight to see. So, why do we do it? I've already mentioned a few of these things throughout the course of talking here, but why do we do it? I think branding's a really big deal. You see JC Gurry, I see Isaac in here every week talking about your bid helper. Like that's branding, right? That's brand recognition because they're being everywhere. Same thing is going to a trade show, just on like a different level. As much as I would like it, like you're not getting the exposure by commenting on this show that you would get by having a booth at FenceTech. So you're what's the term in the marketing world where people see you? With impressions,
Okay.
right? So you're getting infinitely more impressions by having a booth at FenceTech than a lot of things that you're doing, and a lot of things that I do. So that's a big deal. And I kind of to circle back to the guy that signed up for Sao Paulo a year later after having seen us at the Northeast Trade Show and all that stuff. So that's that's kind of not really branding, but like kind of just to follow that like marketing and ongoing marketing and stuff like that. So I think if people know who you are, they're going to be a little bit more likely to buy your stuff, right? And I don't mean just if they know you exist. Obviously, they're not going to buy something if they don't know you exist. But I think if they kind of know you and it's like, oh, I've seen them 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 times or whatever that is, then I feel like in the consumer mind, it kind of builds confidence in the brand or in the product, just having seen it around so many places, so many different times. So I think all of that plays into why we're there. And I will talk. I put in my notes that I'll talk to a couple hundred people at FenceTech who probably don't know what Simpolo is. So I don't know that I personally will talk to a couple hundred people. I will talk to a lot of people. But I think collectively among our group, we will definitely talk to a few hundred people. And there's good odds that a decent bit of them have never heard of Simpolo before they came over and talked to us. We do our little $100 giveaway putt deal. So if you're going to be at FenceTech and you want a chance to win $100, come by there and we'll set you up with a putter and give you a chance to win $100. You don't have to do anything for that. We're also, I didn't mention it before and I was supposed to. Oh my goodness. Here we are at the end of the show. So we're going to give away a TV as well. So for that, you're going to have to like give us a card, or we have some little card shaped forms that you can fill out. And it's not, yeah. So that's the requirement to be in the drawing for the TV, right? Is you got to give us a card or fill out that little thing. But anyway, we're going to give away the TV that we use at the show. We're going to buy it in Salt Lake City. We're going to use it for the show. And then hopefully we're going to give it away to somebody at the end of the show. So from the exhibitor perspective, to me, it's cheaper to just give the TV away, right? You can go buy a TV that costs a few $100, use it for the show, and then give it away at the end of the show. And it's cheaper than trying to get it back here and then store it and all of that other stuff. So it sounds crazy, but it's just the way it is. It's just the way it works in my mind, right? And then the sales opportunities that you're going to have in that room, I put would be next to impossible to get any other way. Okay, so the people in the room are there because they're in the fence industry and they're looking for the latest, greatest things in the fence industry. If you run, I don't know, some ads on Facebook, Ilaria, how good of a job do you think you could do running paid ads on social media to target people specifically in the fence industry that are looking to improve? No?
Not right now.
No opinion?
No, I think they would help. No, I'm joking. I think they will help a lot. That's the whole goal of like paid advertising. But that doesn't mean that paid advertising alone is gonna solve your problems.
So the people I don't know, maybe were you listening?
Yeah.
So the people at FenceTech are going to be there looking to improve.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got there's just so's everywhere. I'm going to put a sticky note on the TV that I'm looking at that with so in a big cross through it. But there is the exhibitors, the people selling stuff, and then there's the people that have fence companies or work at fence companies, right? And those people are there to see the latest and greatest and all of that stuff, right? So I don't think you could target the people that specifically that well by social media, right?
By a lot of social media. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well,
yes, you could.
Prove it. How about that? Prove it to me. All right. So there's massive sales opportunities in the room. Whether Ilaria can target people as well as we could by having a booth or not, it doesn't. I don't know. But there's massive sales opportunities in that room.
Okay, one more thing. That would help the whole branding. But as I was saying, the paid advertising wouldn't be enough most of the time. There's like more involved. There's like just being there, being present, and someone not knowing that you were there and just kind of bumping into you.
Oh, remember that episode, The Power of Presence?
Yeah.
So that was, I think that was right after we went to the Northeast show. And like I said, didn't have a booth, didn't do anything, just walked around, and people were scheduling Simpolo demos just because we were walking around in there. So yeah, I think presence is an excellent word for what we're doing here. We're being present. Yeah. So the sales opportunities, and then also, I mean, I believe in this industry, and I want to help support the industry, and I believe in the people who are hosting these events, and I want to try to help support them as much as I can. And I mean, that's kind of the final point that I have for reasons why we go. is to just kind of promote the industry as a whole, right? And to just be a part of the reason why these shows exist and why they're growing and why they're doing bigger and better and all of that stuff. And so we're just kind of being supportive of that. That's the end of it. That would took way longer than I thought it was going to take, but that's the end. I appreciate everybody listening. I hope to see you all at Fence Tech coming up. If not, then I hope to see you at another show in another day at another time, because I promise you, I personally have no doubt that it's worth the time and the money and the energy that goes into attending these shows. And I highly suggest that everybody go to maybe 3, right? I don't know that going to just 1 is it, because I think the first one is going to be
chaos.
Yeah, right. But then once you kind of figure out what it is, and then you go to a second one and a third one, like I think I would suggest to at least just go to 3, right? Well, thanks everybody, and we're gonna sign off, and we'll see you next time with some more awesome stuff.